All right, let's go ahead and battle the misinformation foreign agents here on TikTok. What do you say? All right, so for section 1, it's just the short title. So the Restrict Act is an acronym. The acronym is Restricting the Emergence of Security Threats that Risk Information and Communications Technology Act. That's what Restrict Act stands for. Again, it's the restricting the emergence. What does emergence mean? The beginning of. Because even though, we feel like this tech stuff has been around a long time, and these old guys probably should have figured this out a long time ago, well, you know what? They haven't. And so now we really got to get on this. And we know we got to get on this because this already happened in 2016, and we don't want that to happen again. So, we already tried, the Congress got together after election. They got together and they made, I can't remember the name of the bill. I will find out about it so that you guys at least know. But they had another bill that was a lot more broad than this one. And it didn't, say, okay, we're only talking about in emergency cases. And an emergency case would be if, let's say, Iran wants to buy the information of a family of an Iranian protester in Iran, let's say, and they want to find out about her family in the United States to extort them for cash or what have you, right? We don't want Iran to be able to get that information. I mean, you would think that you wouldn't want Iran to get that information. They may not already have that information. They may not be able to get that information from 2016, right? So they may need information today. And we need to say we're not going to give Iran information about anyone in the United States or anyone in any Western-friendly countries. So that's what this Restrict Act is, okay? But before, it was way too broad. Like they're saying that would have restricted free speech the way they had it written before, because anybody could be considered someone that shouldn't have our data, any country. And we can't just do that, right? And you can't say it's any data, right? Because there's got to be a line. There's one thing to know someone's location, and it's another thing to know that, their favorite color is red. Although in all honesty, there's probably information one can get from the color red about their personality, and Section 2 is all the definitions of the words that you're going to find throughout the bill. So we talked about a lot of other words. We're going to go on to critical infrastructure. So critical infrastructure, that meaning has the meaning given the term in Section 1016E of the USA Patriot Act. So that's where that buzzword, it's just like the Patriot Act. Now, I didn't want the Patriot Act to pass from day one. I was anti-Patriot Act because I thought it was way too broad. It gave the government way too much power. I was against it from day one, but alas, you weren't allowed to be against it. In all honesty, I got in a lot of trouble. So while there are some bad things about the USA Patriot Act, there were some good things, and a lot of things have changed. And this right here is just mentioning what the definition of critical infrastructure is. So critical infrastructure is going to be something like your water, electricity, the gas infrastructure, like all of that kind of stuff. Transportation of energy is going to be critical infrastructure. Okay, so then it defines entity. And the entity means any of the following, whether established in the United States or outside the United States. So it can be a firm, a government agency, a labor union, a fraternal organization. And it goes on and on about an entity is just some kind of group or person or something, contract, whatever. That's what that means. Foreign adversary. What does foreign adversary? Now here they define specifically what a foreign adversary is. So let's go ahead and read the definition of foreign adversary, because this is the most important definition in this entire bill. So the term foreign adversary, A, means any foreign government or regime determined by the Secretary pursuant to sections 3 and 5, to have engaged in a, let me underline this, long-term pattern or serious instances of conduct significantly adverse to the national security of the U.S. or the security and safety of United States persons. So again, this isn't just, not any country. They're saying like North Korea could be considered a country to have engaged in long-term pattern of or serious instances of conduct. So as I was saying, they want to have the ability to say a foreign adversary, someone that we're at war with, someone who is constantly fighting the United States, that we don't have a friendly relationship, we don't want them to be allowed to access data. So this is specifically for foreign adversaries. And it says this includes, it's going to spell out what it includes. This is letter B, includes unless removed, so you have the option of being removed at some point, by the Secretary pursuant to Section 6. And we'll get on to Section 6 later. Roman numeral 1, the People's Republic of China, including the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and Macau Special Administrative Region. All right, it also includes the Republic of Cuba, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Democratic, that always makes me laugh, although it is kind of true, it is a democracy in a sense, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela under the regime of Nicolas Maduro Moros. So that's China. So we have China, Cuba, Iran, Korea, Russia, and Venezuela. So this only affects 6 countries. That's it. And any of these 6 countries can be removed at any time if they stop engaging in a long-term pattern or serious instances of conduct significantly adverse to our national security. So again, this is what your creators here on TikTok are fighting against and are lobbying Congress against. Then it defines holding, and holding means a stock. So it defines stock, right? So holding means an equity interest, a stock, a security, a share, a partnership interest, an interest in a limited liability company, a membership interest, or any participation, right, or other equivalent, however designated and of any character. And so they have to have one of those things, they have to own part of the company. And we know that China has golden shares in TikTok and in ByteDance. Anyone who says that they don't either is ignorant or is a liar. There's no in between there. So it says, like I said, designated and of any character, and B, includes without limitation any security convertible into an ownership interest, and right, warrant, or option to acquire ownership interest. So this is saying if Russia right now doesn't own any shares in Meta whatsoever, right? But if they buy into Facebook or buy into Meta to where they're going to acquire ownership, or even if they buy something that could later turn into shares, that would not be allowed. Russia would not be allowed to own any shares whatsoever in Meta. So when they say it's a TikTok ban, it could very well be a Facebook ban. It could very well be a Google ban. It could very well be, an energy company ban. Like, name a company, and it could very well be that. Okay, we have a holding entity. These kind of things I don't really think. A person means, and I think this is important, means a natural person, including a citizen or national. That means someone who's not an American, but is living here for whatever reason. Maybe they're, you're here under asylum of the United States or of any foreign country. And then it just talks about who's going to be involved in this. So who the relative executive department agency heads, it lists, those people, the relevant committees of Congress. So it's telling you right here, there's like a bunch of people that have to sign off on this stuff. This isn't just like, oh, poof, it's so easy to do now. No. You still have to go through the system of checks and balances that makes the United States the United States. Like anyone who thinks that this is just a poof, automatic, we're being mean to TikTok ban, doesn't know what the United States even is. They don't even know what the Constitution is. Do they know what the purpose of the Supreme Court is? I'm going to say no, because if they did, they wouldn't say such silly nonsense. All right, so like I said, so section 2 is all of the definitions. We're done with the definitions. Oh, maybe I should specify transaction. What does transaction mean? Transaction means any acquisition, importation, transfer, okay, blah, 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 blah. It means if any people trade data, if I sell you data, if I buy data, whatever, from those countries that were mentioned earlier, Russia, what was it? Russia? It was China they specified first, and it included Hong Kong and Macau, rightfully so. Cuba, Iran, Korea, North Korea, I should specify, Russia, and Venezuela. So 6 countries. All right, so section 3 is addressing information and communication technology products. So we're learning about the products and services that pose undue or unacceptable risk. So what are they worried about? So in general, the secretary met with a bunch of agency heads, and they're authorized to and shall take action to identify, deter, disrupt, prevent, mitigate, stop any risk arising from any covered transaction by any person or with respect to any property subject to the jurisdiction of the United States that the secretary determines. Okay, so if any of these things happen, then we can go ahead and ban TikTok, right? Or ban Facebook, or ban Google, or ban Parler, like name it. This is giving us permission to ban these social media apps that are dealing in our data with our foreign adversaries. So the secretary has to first determine that it poses an undue or unacceptable risk of A, sabotage or subversion of the design, integrity, manufacturing, production, distribution, installation, operation, or maintenance of information and communications technology products and services in the United States, okay? So if we think that China, for example, is putting spy chips in our computer, then the secretary now has the right to act on that. And he had the right to, or she or he, the secretary had the right to act on this before, but we didn't have it spelled out exactly how this process all went. And because we didn't have it all spelled out, things were, getting through the cracks, if you will. And so now in the Restrict Act actually is saying this is exactly how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to keep your data safe from rogue nations. It's a lot easier to limit data going to those countries than it is to limit data going everywhere. So this is like a big starting point is really what it is, because we have to follow rules. The catastrophic effects on the security or resilience of the critical infrastructure or digital economy of the United States. So they don't want China owning Bitcoin, for example. I mean, do you want China to run the monetary policy of the United States? I sure as hell don't. C, interfering in or altering the result or reported result of a federal election. So again, this says that if the secretary sees that the country is interfering in, or the company like Facebook, or altering the result or repeated or reported results. So if they're interfering in the result of a federal election, as determined in coordination with the Attorney General, because we have checks and balances here, the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of Treasury, and the Federal Election Commission, or, so you have to have those people in C, or you have to have D, coercive or criminal activities by a foreign adversary that are designed to undermine democratic processes and institutions or steer policy and regulatory decisions in favor of the strategic objectives of a foreign adversary to the detriment of the national security of the United States as determined by the Attorney General, Director of National Intelligence, Treasury, Federal Election Community. Oh my gosh. So again, coercive activities like getting people to make TikToks saying, keep this bill from passing because we want to share data with China. We want China to own your critical infrastructure. Or 2, otherwise poses an undue or unacceptable risk to the national security of the United States or the safety of United States persons. And we know persons can be an American or it can be a Chinese national who's here, on asylum. And again, we know that China is kidnapping Chinese nationals here in the United States. People have already been charged and convicted for that crime, 6 people. We'll get into that later. Now, B is the procedure. So number 1, in general. So we're just now starting this act, right? So if this act gets passed tomorrow, you can't expect China to just, dump their shares, if you will, in TikTok and ByteDance. Like you can't just poof, make it go away, right? It's going to take some time to get that together, right? So the United States is kind and says not later than 180 days after the date of enactment of this act, the Secretary, in consultation with the relevant executive department and agency heads, so those people that we talked about before, the Attorney Generals, the Director of National Intelligence, etc., determine that not later than 180 days after the date in which the Secretary initiates such review, if such transaction poses an undue or unacceptable risk under subsection A2 and qualifies as a covered transaction what does that mean? So that means first they're going to have up to 180 days. That's 6 months, right? Give or take a couple of days. So it's 6 months. So once this act is voted on and passes Congress and gets signed by President Biden, then China has 6 months to let go of their 1% ownership in ByteDance. If China doesn't want to give up their 1% ownership in ByteDance, then they're not going to be allowed to have TikTok or operate. ByteDance won't be able to operate anything in the United States. So China's going to have to give up that 1% stake, and they don't want to. And so that's why they say TikTok will be banned. And then once they, tell them, okay, you have 6 months. So you have 6 months to, decouple, right? So then after that, if they find that, they didn't really decouple, or, ByteDance is still communicating with China, or they find out, hey, you know what? They can't even own it, so it doesn't even matter. So forget that the tangent I was about to go off on, because I'd be incorrect. So if they find an instance, though, where data, let's say Meta passes data to Russia, and they find an instance of that, no later than 180 days after the date that the Secretary says, hey, something's weird, we need to review. Then they will go ahead, they have that many days after that. So it could be up to a full year before someone gets busted for, giving your data to another country. Now, why is this important? Because we're in, what is this? We're in 2023 right now. This is, it's March 2023. Let's say April, just because it's right around the corner. That's month 4. A year from now, we're going to be in the midst of the primaries. So we need to get this done like tomorrow. We don't have time to say, you know what, this bill isn't perfect. So we want you guys to vote against it. No. That's why they designed this to only affect those 6 countries, because they thought that even the TikTokers on here who are paid by China, that even they would understand, hey, look, Russia shouldn't be allowed to own Meta, especially in the latter half of 2024 as we go into the elections. But that's not what the TikTokers on here believe. So you've got Russia, China, Cuba, Iran, all these countries that want to get in on our elections, and they're just trying to put this emergency bill in to only stop those 6 countries. And the TikTok creators are on here saying that this is a First Amendment violation or some BS, and I'm a crazy lady for speaking out on it, rather than actually reading this. And they don't even give you the full truth. That's the thing, is it's a very biased report. Very biased report. So again, we're on addressing information and communication technology products. So we're on products. Published explanations, if practicable. So if we can do this with the national security and law enforcement interest of the United States. So if we can tell you why, if we can publish the explanation of why we are saying that this data sale is bad, if we can publish that, we will, provided it's not going to hurt the national security and law enforcement interests of the U.S. In coordination and cooperation with the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary shall publish information. Again, those people were lying to you when they said that this was somehow going to affect the Freedom of Information Act. It's just, you got to write bills with specificity, am I right? Okay. So it says published explanations is what we're talking about. So the Secretary shall publish information in a declassified form to explain how a covered transaction that the Secretary denied or otherwise mitigated under paragraph 1 meets the criteria established in section 4, right? That's what that's saying. That is saying, if we can tell you, media, exactly what China was doing at the time that they were doing it to make us shut TikTok down, we will give you all that information. But if we can't give you that information because it's classified, we can't give you that information until it's declassified. Now, think if we're in a war right now, and it's not even a hot war, but let's say we do get into a hot war. Let's just say that happens, and we don't have this law on the books. You're gonna be all ticked off that this law is not on the books, and you're fighting against it. I just don't understand this. Why would you want China to know what the hell we know is going on with them in the midst of a war? You need to have secrets. Secrets win wars. Secrets in supply chains, strategy, the 3 S's of success in wars. Then it says 3. The kids are having a good old time. Then it says 3, certain administrative procedure requirements inapplicable. Section 533 of Title 5, United States Code shall not apply to any regulation promulgated. I don't know what that 3 means. So someone can tell me what number 3 means, because I don't freaking know. All right. Section 4. I think this only has like 6 sections, so we're getting close to being done. Section 4, addressing information and communications technology products and services holdings that pose undue or unacceptable risk. In general, the Secretary shall identify and refer to the President any covered holding that the Secretary determines in consultation with the relevant executive department and agency head poses an undue or unacceptable risk to the national security of the U.S. and Americans or persons, because it can be a Chinese national. Procedure, review, and referral. The Secretary shall, by regulation, establish procedures. So again, establish procedures by which the Secretary, in consultation with the relative executive department and agency head, shall conduct reviews. This is A. Conduct reviews of holdings to determine if such holdings constitute covered holdings, as in it's a lot of gobbledygook, but it's basically the secretary, as new companies, new sectors, technology sectors, if you will, if as those new sectors are developed in the future, the secretary has to determine whether or not the data that they would be collecting in that sector would pose an undue or unacceptable risk if that data was traded to China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, Cuba. B, refer to the president. It says and then the president also has to determine that yes, that country is that company, technology sector, whatever, is an unacceptable risk. So the president also has to agree. So referrals prior to the establishment of regulation. So this is the establishment of regulation. So now they're talking about what about the companies, sectors, whatever, that were around before we started passing this? What are we going to do about the people before? Because again, we have to be specific. Referrals prior to the establishment. At any time preceding the issuance of regulations or establishment of procedures under subparagraph A, the secretary may identify and refer to the president a holding determined to be covered holding. Basically, it's saying if TikTok didn't have these regulations, or Facebook, when those companies were established, we didn't have these set of regulations, right? That Russia couldn't own it, China, etc., yada, yada. So this is saying, okay, so now we're allowed to go back and look at those companies now as well, is all that's saying. 3, administrative procedure requirements inapplicable. The Subchapter 2 of Chapter 5 and Chapter 7 of Title 5 United States Code, commonly known as the Administrative Procedure Act, shall not apply to any referral by the Secretary to the President of a covered holding. I have a hard time understanding that, but I'm not going to worry about it for right now. All right, actions by the President. This is C, actions by the President. In general, subject to Section 13, with respect to any covered holding referred to the President under subsection A, if the President determines that the covered holding an undue or unacceptable risk to national security or the security and safety of United States persons, the President may take such action as the President considers appropriate to compel divestment of or otherwise mitigate the risk associated with such covered holdings to the full extent the covered holding is subject to the jurisdiction with respect to. And I'm going to go over that. So this is where they're saying, okay, this is where TikTok gets banned. TikTok would get banned because now the president can say TikTok is a national security threat. Right now, they can't say TikTok is a national security threat. He can't say that Facebook is a national security threat. He doesn't have that power because Facebook is a private company. You can't just say, oh, that's private company A is a national security threat. But why are they a national security threat? Because it's attached to China, or because that company is selling data to Russia. Oh, that's why they're a national security threat, as outlined in here, because it's those 6 countries. Well, in that case, then we can go ahead and ban that country or ban that app. That's what that says. And it says, with respect to A, the United States operations, assets, or property of the entity in which the covered holding is held, or any products or services owned, controlled, developed, manufactured, or supplied by the entity used in the United States. B, any tangible or intangible assets, wherever located, are used to support or enable use of the product or software of the entity in the United States, and not or, and any data obtained or derived from the product or software of the United States. So what is that saying? So that is saying that if the ByteDance headquarters or the Meta headquarters, let's say, or not even the headquarters necessarily, it could just be where they communicate. They could just be able to communicate So it's like that. Remember that Alpha Bank, I want to say, in Russia that was communicating? No, the Alpha Bank was in the United States, I want to say. And it was communicating with some bank in Russia. I can't remember the whole thing right now, but that wouldn't be allowed. So they would say, oh, well, you are communicating with this computer or this server in China, Russia, Cuba, etc., and that is not allowed. It's number 2 is non-delegatable. Whatever. Who cares? The authority to compel. So this gives them the authority to compel divestment. That means remove your investments of a covered holding of TikTok, of Facebook, whatever, under paragraph 1, which is probably saying once you've been determined to be a foreign adversary, you have the 180 days to, decouple from TikTok or what have you. And may not, and it has to be exercised. It may only be exercised by the president. So only the president can say, yeah, that's okay. So the Speaker of the House can't say that. The state governors can't say that. The senators can't make that decision. The president has to say, this is a rogue nation and they can't have the data. So no, that's who does it. So then it says 3, announcement. So how do we announce that this TikTok or Facebook or Google, whatever, how do we announce it to let people know, hey, this is what's going on, to be totally transparent to the people? If the president determines that action is required, so all of these things previous to this that's in the bill have to be checked off, right? They have to say, yes, this actually happens. So if the president determines that action is required pursuant to paragraph 1, the president shall announce the decision no later than 30 days after the date on which the secretary refers the covered holding to the president pursuant to subsection A. Enforcement of divestment. The president may direct the attorney general to seek appropriate relief, including divestment relief in the district courts of the United States in order to implement and enforce this subsection. So section 5 is considerations. And I want to say is this the section or was it section 6? Yeah, it's section 6. Where's considerations? So proprietary information and communications technology areas. It talks about that. This is just like, okay, so what are we considering right now? What are we seeing as sectors, technology sectors that we don't want our foreign adversaries to own? So we're looking at software, hardware, any other product or service integral to telecommunication products and services, including wireless local area networks, mobile networks, satellite payloads, so satellites, cable, networking, networks, computer platforms, internet hosting services, cloud-based stuff. So, internet, unmanned vehicles is covered in this. So, your Teslas are covered under this. Software designed for communicating via the internet that's used by more than more than 1 million persons in the United States. Desktop applications, mobile applications, gaming, payment, web-based, or information and communications technology products and services, integral. I gotta look that up. To artificial intelligence and machine learning. So that's going to be like my kids do iReady, for example. That's artificial intelligence and machine learning too, right? So they're using artificial intelligence to teach the kids. We don't want China having control over that or seeing that and watching their eye movements because, yes, that is a thing, and we don't want them knowing that much about Americans. Quantum key distribution, quantum communications, quantum computing, post-quantum cryptography, autonomous systems, advanced robotics, biotechnology, synthetic biology, computational biology, and e-commerce. Considerations relating to undue and acceptable risk and determining whether a covered transaction poses an undue or unacceptable risk under Section 3A or 4A, the Secretary, 1, shall, as the Secretary, determine appropriate and in consultation with the appropriate agency heads, consider where available, any removal or exclusion order by the people, the intelligence people, right? Any order or license revocation issued by the FCC, any relevant provision of the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Act, any actual potential threats. So you have to have a lot of evidence showing that we shouldn't be letting TikTok give our data to China or Meta give our data to Russia. Like, you have to say this is, it's not just the color blue. They're giving like information that's important. Whether or not they can be convinced not to vote because, they feel hopeless anyway. And so just to say, it doesn't matter if you vote. And then that, I can go ahead and focus on that person and bombard them with ads, what have you, saying, don't vote, don't vote. It doesn't matter if you vote, don't vote. And then I can change the precinct, for example, of where they would vote, and then they'll just fill out a provisional ballot, or they won't vote at all, and the provisional ballots don't count. They don't count in North Carolina. Look it up. We'll do another podcast on that. Section 6. We're on Section 6. We're almost done. How many sections? This one's quick. Ugh. Designation of foreign adversaries. So in general, they got this blah, blah, blah designation, the important people. The important people that they talked about earlier, the national intelligence, all of that have to designate the regime or government as a foreign adversary and long-term conduct, yada, yada. And if the removal of designation, the Secretary may, in the consultation with all those people, change their mind that this is a foreign adversary. So you can do that too. Notice no later than 15 days. The designation, you got to start doing stuff. So Section 6 is just blah, 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 blah. Section 7 is the resolution of disapproval or of designation or removal of designation as a foreign adversary. So this section just talks about what are the procedures to name someone a foreign adversary. So like I said, in this bill, there are only 6 countries that are determined to be foreign adversaries. And those 6 countries are China, Cuba, Iran, Russia, Venezuela, and I'm forgetting one, but North Korea. So those 6 countries are the only countries that matter in this Restrict Act. And so then it says, okay, so what happens if you want to add another country? You can't just say, you know what, we are going to say that we're no longer allowed to sell data or to Canada. And Canada is no longer allowed to own any shares in American companies that deal with technology. We can't just like willy-nilly say that. The president has to show cause that Canada should be placed in the foreign adversary category. You can't just go poof. No. You got to say, hey, Congress, can you agree with me that Canada is a foreign adversary and as such shouldn't be allowed to own any part of our energy infrastructure? So that's what Section 7 is all about. And it talks about initiation. How do you get that started? You have 60 days to get a joint resolution. So you have to say, you know what? I think that Canada is a foreign adversary, a threat to national security. Then you have 60 days to introduce a resolution in the Senate, and the majority leader has to be okay with that, or the minority leader has to be okay with that, and it also has to go to the House, and then it's got to be considered. Then it's floor consideration in House of Representatives, so they got to debate it in the House. They got to consider it in the House. Then they got to go to the Senate, consider it in the Senate, debate it in the Senate. Then they have to vote and say, yes, Canada is a foreign adversary. Once they vote on it, then you have the rulings of the chair procedure. So if the chair says, hey, I don't think that this is correct, I'm going to appeal this because I don't think that we've looked at this correctly, that's what happens next. Then they consider any veto messages. Is, the president saying, I don't agree with this? Is the majority saying it? Like, what's going on, right? Then it's rules relating to Senate and House of Reps, coordination with action by other House, treatment of a covered joint resolution, treatment of companion measures. So, this is just blah, blah. Rules of Senate and House of Representatives as an exercising in the rulemaking power of the Senate and the House of Representatives, respectively, and as such are deemed a part of the rules of each House, respectively, but applicable only with the respect to the procedure to be followed in that House in the case legislation described in those sections, and supersede other rules other to the. So this is just all, checks and balances count. And you need full recognition of the constitutional right of either House to change the rules at any time. So we're making this act. If we feel that this act is incorrect, needs to be updated, renegotiated, rewritten, whatever, you can do that. Effect of covered joint resolution. A joint resolution, you can either... So then it says, what about if they don't approve it? It's a disapproval of designation. A joint resolution of disapproval of designation that is enacted in accordance with the section shall remove the designation as a foreign adversary. So there you go. A joint resolution of disapproval of, a joint resolution of disapproval or removal of designation. So it addresses that too, okay? Then we get into section 8. I don't have page numbers on here, and I know it's 55, and you guys are sticking with me, and I appreciate that, but we're almost done. Implementing authorities, regulations, and carrying out the responsibilities under this act, the Secretary may establish rules, regulations, and procedures as the Secretary considers appropriate. Classes of transactions, other authorities. This is just, they can issue guidance and advisory opinions. The Secretary can create list of foreign persons that may be subject to prohibition. So if we sanction a specific Russian or a specific Asian or Chinese guy or a specific North Korean person, whatever, if we specify Firtash, let's say, then they also won't be able to own part of a technology company that has data, which I think is reasonable. Additional authority, the Secretary may undertake any other action as necessary to carry out the responsibilities under this act that is not otherwise prohibited by law, because as you know, following the law is important here in the United States of America. And then it talks about appointing an advisory committee, so a technical advisory committee, which you would think people would want. So this is saying we need to do that. So Section 9, information to be furnished. In carrying out this act, the Secretary may require information or reports required to be submitted include the production of any documents relating to any act, transaction, or property relating to a transaction or holding under review or investigation. So maybe, they're saying China can't own the warehouse, I would think, if you will. They can't own the warehouse where the ByteDance computers are stored, maybe? I don't know. 2, require information or reports required to be submitted. Require information and reports before, during, or after consummation of a transaction or holding under review or investigation, and conduct investigations, hearings, blah, blah, take witness testimony. And then it says, then it talks about the confidentiality and disclosure of information. And it says, the Secretary may disclose information or documents that are not otherwise publicly or commercially available in the following circumstances. Pursuant to an administrative or judicial proceeding, so they have to say, yes, this information can be released, or an act of Congress, or a request from a relevant committee of Congress, pursuant to a request from any federal, state, or local government entity or any foreign government entity of the United States ally. So if an ally requests information, they'll get it too. If the request is important to the national security analysis or actions of the Secretary, but only to the extent necessary for national security purposes and subject to appropriate confidentiality and classification requirements. If any party to whom the information or documents pertain consents to such disclosure, and if the Secretary says it's in the interest of the national interest of the United States or any other authorized by federal law. And then Section 10 is the enforcement. So, how are they going to enforce the subpoenas? What can the Attorney General do? Can they declare injunctions? All of that stuff. Then it talks about the penalties. And the penalties, it says, no person can engage in any conduct prohibited by or contrary to or refrain from engaging in any conduct required by any regulation, order, direction, mitigation measure, prohibition, blah, blah, under the Act. No person can, so it just says you can't do anything to, against what this says. Okay, additional requirements. A, continuation of effect. So this just says any representation, statement, or certification made by any person shall be deemed to be continuing in effect until the person notifies the Department of Commerce or relevant executive department, and then notification, civil penalties, which include a fine of not more than $250,000 or an amount that is twice the value of the transaction that is the basis of the violation with respect to which the penalty is imposed, whichever is greater, and the revocation of any mitigation measure or authorization issued under the Act to this person. Talks about civil forfeiture, criminal forfeiture, and then the judicial review, who has jurisdiction. The term classified information has the meaning given in the term, we talked about earlier, and includes any information or material that has been determined by the federal government pursuant to so basically classified information is classified information, right? And so this goes on and it says, look, we will give you all the unclassified information contained in the administrative record filed pursuant to paragraph 2 that is not otherwise privileged or subject to statutory protection, so top secret, classified, whatever, shall be provided to the petitioner with appropriate protections for any privileged or confidential trade secrets and commercial or financial information. And then it talks about the cameras, so sensitive security information, privileged law enforcement information. Oh, that's true. They probably don't want to see how. So if you have people watching George Floyd TikToks or whatever, they can tell exactly what side of the fence you are on. You don't need to like something or not, because they can see in your eyes exactly, how strong of a feeling you have for or against. Like they could rate you on a scale of 1 to 10 to see if, how the George Floyd murder affected you. And then they could use that information to get you to vote or not vote for a candidate. And then it says that we're not going to give information under seal. So you have to remember, too, that if they all of a sudden say, look, TikTok is banned, and the media says, oh, well, I want to know why TikTok is banned, we're going to say, okay, great, you can find out why TikTok is banned, but not right now because this evidence is under seal while we go, and adjudicate all of this. So you obviously can't know that because that's just the laws of the United States. And then it talks about the relationship to other laws. So it does talk about right here, it says the relationship to Section 721 of the Defense Production Act of 1950. It says that nothing shall prevent or preclude the President or the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. from exercising any authority in the Defense Production Act. The President may not exercise any authority under Section 4 with respect to a covered holding that directly resulted from a transaction if, A, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. reviewed the transaction as a covered transaction and its implementing regulations and notified the parties of the transaction that the committee completed all action with respect to the transaction, or the President announced a decision declining to take action with respect to the transaction. And then who they need to coordinate with, the transition to, how they're going to start implementing this. They're going to have rules, regulations, orders, determinations, licenses, whatever. And then the miscellaneous, this is the last section that everybody says everybody's making a BS about. This is, it says the Paperwork Reduction Act, appointment of candidates, administrative protected information in civil actions, the applicability. Okay. In general, this is what they're saying is going to damage the Freedom of Information Act. No provision of this act shall be construed to create a right to obtain access to information in the possession of the federal government that was considered in making a determination under this act, that a transaction is a covered transaction or interest, or to prohibit, mitigate, or take action against a covered transaction or interest, including any classified national security information or sensitive but unclassified. So they're specifying once again that we'll give you all the information, but we can't give you the classified information, and we can't give you the top secret information. And then it just says severability and the authorization of appropriations, and that's the end of the Restrict Act. So literally every single thing that the foreign agents of TikTok are saying is lies. They're total lies. And they're lobbying Congress right now on behalf of the Chinese government, on behalf of the North Korean government, on behalf of the Russian government, on behalf of the Cuban government, on behalf of the Venezuelan government under Maduro. That is who the TikTok creators on here are aligned with. That is who they're lobbying in defense of. I sure hope that they at the very least talk to a lawyer, because in all honesty, the way I see it, since they're lobbying Congress on behalf of those foreign adversaries especially, but if you're going to lobby on behalf of any nation, you must register as a foreign agent. So if you are going to Congress, if you're going to Washington, D.C., and you're talking to Congress people about how you want China and Russia to be able to own TikTok if they want to, then you're a foreign agent for that country and you need to register. Now, I'd like to thank you so much for listening to the first episode, if you will, of whatever I'm going to name this podcast. And, I appreciate your support, and I hope that you listen, tell your friends, And, if anything, spread this information. Fight the disinfo here on TikTok. The Russian Federation and